Maybe it'll be halfway covered by the time.
Okay, let's call the meeting, the Tuesday, September 6th, City Council closed session meeting to order at 5:03. And can we start with a roll call, please?
Sure. Councilmember Lara,
Here.
Councilmember Santos.
Here.
Councilmember Fan.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Martinez.
Here.
Mayor White.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Next, we'll go to public comments. Do we have any public comments for the closed session?
I have no callers on the line.
All right, Mr. Pinckney, can you read the items for discussion in closed session, please?
Yes, the first item is conference with real property negotiator pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8. The property is north and south side of East 4th Street, east of Beaumont Avenue. Assessor parcel number 418-190-004, a portion of, and then 418-190-005, a portion of, 418-190-006 and 007, 418-140-028 and 029. The agency negotiator is the city manager or her designee. The negotiating parties are the City of Beaumont as the potential seller, and Fifth Street Development LLC is a potential buyer, and under negotiation are price and terms of payment. Item number 2 is conference with labor negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. The city designated representatives are City Manager Elizabeth Gibbs and Administrative Services Director Carrie Mendoza. The employee organizations are the POA and managers professional technical as individuals.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we'll go ahead and adjourn to closed session at 5:05. I think we're ready to go. What's that? He'll be here. Yeah. Oh, okay, we do need to wait for the city attorney.
Okay. Give us 2 more minutes, man. He's on the restroom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're still waiting for Mr. Pinckney. How about now? Okay. We'll call back to order the closed session of the City of Beaumont for the council meeting September 6, 2022. Mr. Pinckney, can you report out of closed session?
Yes, the council met in closed session. Item number 1 was conference with real property negotiator pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8. The property north and south side of East 4th Street, east of Beaumont Avenue, Beaumont, California, assessor parcel numbers 418-190-004, a portion of 418-190-005, a portion of 418-190-006 and 007, 418-140-028 and 029. The agency negotiator, the city manager or designee. The negotiating parties, City of Beaumont as potential seller, and 5th Street Development LLC as potential buyer. Under negotiation are price and terms of payment. There was no reportable action taken on that item. The second item was conference with labor negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. City designated representatives, City Manager Elizabeth Gibbs, and Administrative Services Director Carrie Mendoza. And the employee organizations were the POA and managers, professional, technical as individuals. With respect to the POA, there was reportable action taken in closed session, and there was a motion to approve a side letter number 1 to the 2022-2026 Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Beaumont and the Beaumont Police Officers Association, and authorized the city manager to sign the side letter. The motion was made by Mayor White, the second by Councilmember Lara, and the vote was Mayor White in favor of approving the side letter, Mayor Pro Tem Martinez in favor, Councilmember Fenn in favor, Councilmember Santos in favor, and Councilmember Lara in favor. And the next item on the agenda is action on any closed session items. And we do have an item that was discussed in closed session. There was no action taken in closed session. The action will be taken now in open session. And that would be to approve a side letter number 1 to the 2022-2026 Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Beaumont and managers, professional, technical as individuals, and authorize the city manager to sign that side letter.
And Mr. Pinckney, that item, the side letter was part of the agenda package for tonight?
That's correct. It is in the
So-
agenda, but on that item, you could not take action in closed session, so we're doing it in open session.
Right, but the public had access to that item, correct?
It's in the agenda. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, at this point, are there any, we already took public comments before we went into closed session. And is there any comments? Mr. Fenn?
No comments, Mayor, but I'd like to make a motion, and as stated by council.
Okay,
I'll second.
so we have a motion and a second. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Lara,
Yes.
Councilmember Santos.
Aye.
Councilmember Finn,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Martinez,
Yes.
Mayor White.
Yes. Okay, we'll adjourn the closed session and open the regular session at 6:05. And could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Lara,
Here.
Councilmember Santos,
Here.
Councilmember Finn,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Martinez.
Here.
Mayor White.
Here. And Mr. Santos, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I'll be honored to do that.
Please stand and put your hand on your heart and begin.
Thank you.
Are there any adjustments to the agenda tonight? Nope. Okay. And we'll move on to public comment. Do we have any people?
No public comments from people here. Do we have any on the phone?
We have no callers on the line.
Thank you.
Okay,
No comment.
so I'll skip reading that part of it. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are taken as one action item unless an item is pulled for further discussion here or at the end of action items. Approval of all ordinances and resolutions to be read by title only. Are there any items to be pulled for discussion? Are there any public comments on any of the items? Okay. Council, is there any items that you would like further information or discussion on? Seeing none, I'll take a motion on the consent calendar.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve consent items 1 through 9.
I'll second.
And may we have a roll call, please?
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, move on to the action items. Item number 10, purchase and implementation of a Bolo Wrap less lethal tool. Staff report from our chief, Chief DeLeese.
Here's the action, man.
I don't think we've ever had a demonstration before, have we?
We've had show and tells in the parking lot, but this might be the first live action. Hope it goes well.
Okay.
So evening, Mayor and Council. We're pleased to bring before you a tool that we believe will enhance our abilities by the police officers to calm or diffuse a situation with the least amount of force possible. The Bolo Wrap 150 is a less lethal tool developed for use to prevent or reduce the need for officers to engage in a use of force encounter in the field. The Bolo Wrap is a handheld remote restraint device that discharges an 8-foot Kevlar cord to entangle an individual at a range of 10 to 25 feet. It's not a taser, it's not electrified, just wraps them. The Bolo Wrap 150 is equipped with entangling barbs at the end of each Kevlar cord. So a subject who is actively or passively resisting or taking a fighting stance with closed fists or let's say a bladed posture, they can instantly be wrapped around the legs or arms with the Bolo Wrap. And this will help to alleviate the risk of physical injury to the officer, the person in the field, or perhaps even any bystander. As we know, chemical agents they can overspray and have cross-contamination. And as you know, we comply with Senate Bill 230, which redefined use of force. As stated previously, our department policies meet or exceed these requirements. And so, again, we deal with a growing population of persons with mental health issues or persons in mental crises. This is just another tool that we hope, along with our other tools, to hopefully not have to use lethal force. At this time, we'd like to demonstrate the Bolo Wrap for you. So please look out the window. Got some That's why there's more than one. The point.
No backup, okay, well.
No backup. So
Is there a recommended distance on using
10 to
it?
25 feet, but I tell you, this is where, when we approach subjects, we don't bring one tool. We have the 40 millimeter, we have the pepper spray, the tasers. And the plan is to purchase 20, I'll give it a minute here. There you go. We do. The plan is to purchase 20 of the Bowler wraps, and so that each of the officers that are in the field would have one on them. And so typically when you encounter persons, you try to bring more than one option. This is just another option that we would bring. We did demonstrate this in the police department where it really wrapped up a lieutenant pretty good, and he couldn't move. And we took some video, but it wasn't highest quality because I think people were probably weren't expecting the initial. You can hear the gunshot sound. It's pretty loud in person, and so the video wasn't to that grade. We were just looking at it, but again, this could happen where the first cartridge is ineffective, and you either need a second, or at that point, we've exhausted that option. We're going to go to taser or another option. But the goal is to come out with enough tools to still reduce lethal force. And so I have seen it demonstrated. It does work in this case. I'd rather it had a better, but I'm glad people saw that, because when they ask, well, why'd you have to fire? Sometimes less lethal options fail or they're ineffective. But in this case, we do have a recommend action to approve the purchase of 20 Bowler wrap systems, including accessories and cartridges, and a warranty in the amount of $35,033.84. And with that, I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chief. Whenever I do a technical presentation at work, it always fails. So just want to let you know. Are there any questions or comments on this one?
Yeah, a couple of questions.
Sure, Mr. Martinez.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor. Couple of quick questions on the budget side. So it's coming out of the general fund. Is this already budgeted, or is this amendment going to need to come back at some point?
So this money wasn't budgeted for this purchase. If you remember at our last council meeting, we had a certain amount of money budgeted for the electric police motorcycles. Then we tapped into the AQMD funds. That left some general fund dollars available. This is less than that amount that's still available.
Okay. And then, so I watched some of these on YouTube and looked at some of the videos, and I saw on this report how, was that this report, or it could have been something I read, that showed the different agencies that have gone with it. So it's not just something that we're doing, it's something that's going, quite a few agencies are going with. So I'm always for non-lethal approaches, and I think it's a good investment. We'll see after a year or so, have reflection on how it does, and get comments from the field to see, how effective it is. Just the last question is, are the officers expected to wear these, or is this in the car that they go and grab depending on the situation?
So both options, they do make a holster. I can tell you that some officers are smaller frame, they're running out of room.
That's why I asked, because I know they've got a taser, they've got the, your gun, you've
Right.
got, and,
Right. They do have the load-bearing vests, they do have pouches, they do have clips. There's a law in the state that was just passed for tasers. Everything must be cross-draw. We would mandate something similar. I wouldn't want it near the firearm side. I don't want there to be a muscle memory where you think you're going for Bowler wrap, but you grab your firearm. It doesn't feel the same, it isn't, but we reduce those options. But yes, so they can either carry it out of the car, or some would have it on them. And a lot of it's just going to depend on the frame of the person.
okay. And then one more thing I just thought of. So this brings our inventory to non-lethal, to include the sandbag option on the shotgun.
So we've defuncted that with your approval of the 40 millimeter foam
Right.
cartridge purchase. And so we have and then with the taser, we have the pepper spray, we have the baton, we still have hands and fists,
K9, of course.
and we have pepper ball launchers
All right, very well.
too. And we have canines.
Exactly. All right, I applaud you on the approach, Chief, I really do, so thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Mr. Finn?
Yes, in terms of officer training, so for example, with this malfunction, do they attempt to reload another cartridge if they feel that they're still at a safe distance, or do they go to the next piece of equipment in order?
So that may just depend on field expediency, if the officer's by themselves, and then what happens so swiftly. I think in that case, even what we just witnessed, if the officer was to attempt to run, his feet might have still been tangled. There's still a shock of the person not expecting the sound of the mechanism. There's still deterrence there, but in that case, if I was by myself, I'd have to transition to another tool. But it just depends. If there's multiple officers and we have that kind of time, and often they don't, people change on us quickly. Their behaviors change drastically. And so I just have to say it depends.
Is it? And I haven't seen the video. Is it cumbersome to reload these with a new cartridge?
It's a single cartridge, so you'd have to eject the one and then put in another. If you're by yourself, that could be tough, but if there's multiple officers, then multiple officers each can have this device.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Lara?
Chief, I know that we spoke about this
Yep.
a number of years ago, so what I really appreciate is the fact that you stayed on top of that, you looked into it, and you just didn't purchase it because it was the hottest thing on the market. It's something that you look into and you research, so I appreciate you doing that. Also appreciate the effort that you put into less lethal force as well. So thank you for that, and I appreciate it. That's all I have, Mayor.
Mr. Santos?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a quick, I know there will be a proper training on this and everything. I know it's new for us. Are we gonna, do some certification for this or for the officers to utilize this and use for this equipment?
Oh, absolutely. The company will train us on how to deploy the device and how to use it and how to reload it. There's always training. We won't deploy a device that we have not been trained on properly.
Okay, my question is the certification who will be going to that training. Are they going to certify our officers? I know we have about 54 officers in there.
Right.
And we're purchasing 20 on this. So, they'll be outnumbered for that. I mean, so that's my question. It's the word is certification of the, officers using it.
Yeah, so for our in-house trainers, we attend what's called a train-the-trainer. So we'll be trained, a smaller group will be trained by the manufacturer of the tool. And then the persons that we select to be trainers in our department meet post requirements, free of any improper use of force in their background, free of any bias. We have a minimum years of 3 years as a police officer. That's the minimum. We look for officers that have a little bit more. But, after 3 years, you kind of have an idea of what you're doing. And so we look for those that have a command presence amongst their peers to train and make sure that everybody's using it safely. We don't want to use this unsafely for 2 reasons. We don't want to injure anybody. We don't want our officers to rely on something that they haven't been trained on and it fails, and then they're put in harm's way.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. That's great.
Thank you, Chief. Do we have any public comments on
No
this?
public comments. Any calls on this? Hello? I guess not.
Okay, I will move to approve the purchase of 20 BolaWrap systems, including accessories and warranty from general fund account 1002050707000.
I'll second.
And could we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Lara,
Yes.
Councilmember Santos.
Aye.
Councilmember Finn,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Martinez.
Yes.
Mayor White.
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't think you go anywhere yet, Chief. Item number 11, approval to purchase the one DJI Matrix 300 drone and accessories and 4 DJI Phantom 3 drones and accessories from Drones Made Easy in a total amount not to exceed $56,000.
Okay, presenting to assist tonight will be Lieutenant Robert Galetta, who's our resident drone expert and the manager of this program.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and City Council. Thank you for having me this evening. As you know, the Beaumont Police Department implemented a DJI Matrice 200 drone for police operations in 2017. In that time, the aircraft has been used to document crime and accident scenes, photograph illegal camps, map railroad cleanups, search for and find missing persons, and monitor fireworks violations, just to name a few. Drone technology has improved significantly over the last 5 years, making the use of such equipment an essential part of law enforcement operations nationwide. However, the current DJI Matrice 200 aircraft has exceeded the operational lifespan and needs to be replaced. Although the police department added $13,000 to the general fund for drones, we soon realized the community and the department would be better served if we increased the number of licensed drone pilots and drones for patrol operations. This increase provides for better coverage and increases officer safety. The Beaumont Police Department intends to supplement its current drone program by purchasing 4 smaller DJI Mavic 3 drones for use by the Patrol Division. These drones are portable and can be quickly put into service to aid officers. Each patrol shift will be assigned a drone, which can be utilized 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In addition, the older DJI Matrice 200 would be replaced by a more capable all-weather drone for use in more complex and difficult environments. Essentially, it's an all-weather drone: rain, snow, high winds. 3 competitive bids for drone equipment were requested from Drones Made Easy, Drone Nerds, and Advexture. The quote from Drone Nerds was never provided to us by the vendor. The quote from Advexture was $843.92 less than Drones Made Easy. However, the company only has an online presence, whereas Drones Made Easy has a physical location where drones can be taken to be inspected, worked on, and repaired, etc. As for fiscal impact, there's no fiscal impact to the general fund, and any proposed costs associated with this UAS program will be applied to the SLESA grant, which allows police department to spend funds on frontline law enforcement technology.
Thank you, Officer Galetta.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comments on this?
We have no callers on the line.
All right. Any comments or questions from council? Mr. Finn?
Yes, thank you. Lieutenant, are there any no-fly zones for drones in our service area that you would have to contend with?
No, currently there are not. However, that can change with the creation of a temporary no-flight restriction that can be set up around a fire, et cetera, but currently there are none.
And if there is a temporary one set up, does the police department have the ability to override that, or do they have to seek permission to continue to proceed?
We can do both, yes. We can, override the temporary flight restrictions, but of course with the approval of the FAA, which we regularly do if we're faced with
Okay,
that.
so you guys are still subject to the same rules that any other drone pilot would have, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other comments or questions, I entertain a motion.
I lost the motion. Hold on. You gonna make a motion?
I'll just say it's a long one.
Oh, well, there's 2 different ones here. One here says the total for 56, and the other one's broken down. Which one do you prefer?
That one's good.
The broken down?
That one, yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
All right. So on the agenda, the recommended action is to approve the purchase of 5 drones and equipment from Drones Made Easy, an amount not to exceed $56,000.
I'll second that. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Lara,
Yes.
Councilmember Santos.
Aye.
Councilmember Finn,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Martinez.
Yes.
Mayor White.
Yes. All right, item number 12, reject all bids for capital improvement project CIP 2017-009 Pennsylvania Avenue widening. Staff report from Jeff Hart.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yeah, so in June of this year, the Pennsylvania Avenue widening project was publicly advertised for bids. During the bidding process, at least 9 general construction contractors accessed the bid document, asked questions, or showed interest in bidding the project. And on August 18th this year, only 1 bid was received and publicly open. Staff worked with the city attorney to evaluate the 1 bid received and determine the next steps, considering the lack of additional bid responses. In an ideal situation, multiple bid responses would be received, allowing for competition and greater pricing. Several factors can influence the number of bids received. Some of those can include the current work schedule, available contractors, availability of construction materials, complex regulatory requirements, permitting, and detailed construction contract requirements. Rebidding the project may allow the city an opportunity to reach out to a greater number of contractors and increase the competitive bid responses. While the city may consider awarding the bid to only 1 bidder, it's not required to do so. The municipal code allows the option for the city to reject all bids and re-advertise the project for construction. Allowing staff an opportunity to engage additional bidders in order to provide a more competitive bid response. And with that, it's recommended that Council reject all bids for CIP 2017-009 Pennsylvania Avenue widening project, and then authorize staff to re-advertise for additional construction bids.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comments?
Do we have any calls?
We have no callers on the line.
Okay, no public comments.
Okay, and we will open this up to City Council. Mr. Martinez.
To make a motion, Mayor, if there's no discussion.
I think Mr. Lara had a
Oh,
question.
okay.
Just a real quick question, Mr. Hart. What's the turnaround time frame? This project's unfortunately been dragging on, so I'm hoping we can, I agree with what you want to do, but I'm hoping that we can get this thing turned around and.
Yeah, we'll certainly get a rebid this week, and we are looking at a 3 to 4 week bid turnaround, most likely 3 weeks.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
So, Mr. Hart, when the a single bid came back and it looks like you went out and asked questions, what makes you think that this time we might get more additional bids than what we got the first time?
There's a lot of variables, right? It could be depending, on what current projects they're engaged in, their staffing capabilities in relation to what the contract duration this will be. So we have a 12-month duration, which has seemed fair based on the responses we've gotten. There was some erroneous assumptions on a few of the bidders that there was a higher requirement, a percentage requirement for the main contractor to do the work. That's not so in this case. And then there's some outreach. So we've reached out to several contractors, and we've also worked with the engineer of record to help identify prospective bidders.
So they were under a misunderstanding that the general contractor would have to do a certain percentage of the work, which was not correct. And
Right. We did have 2 that were under that and that have subsequently stated interest in rebidding if we advertise this again.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lara.
Mayor, I'm just going to make a motion.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to reject all bids for CIP 2017-009 Pennsylvania Avenue widening project, widening, and authorize city staff to re-advertise for construction bids.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Lara,
Yes.
Councilmember Santos,
Aye.
Councilmember Finn,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Martinez,
Yes.
Mayor White.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Hart. Item number 13, discussion on a draft land use policy for logistics, warehouse distribution, and other similar industrial development. And staff report from Deputy City Manager Christina Taylor.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This item is returning to you after staff took direction from the presentation which occurred at City Council on August 3rd. At that meeting, we received feedback from Council as well as some stakeholders, interested parties. We continued that work with the stakeholders as it pertains to the primary concern, which was the 1,000 feet of separation as referenced in the citing portion of the policy. Attachment A to this staff report shows the potential revisions. It was in red line format, and I realized when it was uploaded to the agenda, I think the red line went away, so I can walk you through specifically some of those items that changed. But essentially, the changes and discussion points are included in there. Not much had changed in the document. The items that were presented by the council were incorporated, and I'll give you those numbers. And then again, as I referenced in the citing section, citing a design is where the bulk of the discussion would occur. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you'd like to just walk through the policy at this time, that's probably the best way to approach the item.
Okay, let's see if we have any public comments first. We'll take public
Yes, we
comments.
do. David Castaldo?
Mr. Castaldo.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. I read this thoroughly.
I'm not sure we're hearing you, right?
Mike's not on tape.
All right, we'll
Gee,
start.
I get to start all over
we'll
again.
start the
That's
clock
great.
again.
An extra 15 seconds.
There you go.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. I did read this thoroughly. I think it's a very good start. I especially like the part in there where it mentions what benefits our community. We've had too many developers come in, and I'm going to say, I want to put it mildly, took advantage of our community, built the project. They're no longer around. We have to live with it. That being said, I'm going to offer two suggestions. One is, I did 4 years on the planning commission. I did 4 years on the council. And for some strange reason, I never figured this out. The concept plans always look different than the reality plans. And a case in point is a certain warehouse over on Cherry Valley Boulevard. I was told that we weren't going to see much of that building. I see a lot of that building. I was also told over in off of the 60 and Hidden Meadows or Fairway Canyon or whatever they call it now, when it came to the Planning Commission 12 years ago, we weren't supposed to see anything. It wasn't going to affect the hills. Looks like it affected the hills. I would really like to see staff hold these guys, hold developers. This is what you say you're going to build. This is what it's going to look like. I'd like to make sure it looks like it when it gets done. The promises are there. If not, we need to have some repercussions. The only other comment that I would have is I travel a lot. A lot of people know that. I go to a lot of communities. I go to neighborhoods. I go to a lot of industrial areas. Every single industrial area always has trucks parked on side roads. Why can't we be at the forefront and make some of these developers of these mega warehouses, these industrial complexes, supply off-street parking for trucks that are having to wait to unload? We went through this pandemic. We know these guys are professional drivers. They're dedicated. They work hard. Sometimes they get to their stop a little bit early, a day or so. They don't need to have to park on a street that causes issues, causes police issues, law enforcement. If these warehouses and industrial complexes want to be in our community, let them provide some parking for these truckers. Give them a safe haven. Give them a safe place to stay. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you, staff, for doing a great report.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Castaldo.
Next, we have Bill Blankenship.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, staff. My name is Bill Blankenship, here representing Neop Inland Empire Chapter. And I'm coming before you tonight to talk about what's before you as far as, I believe, which is kind of a next step. It's my belief that there's probably more that's needed with that. I don't think in reading it, the council will adopt what's before you this evening. I do think that there is a roadmap essentially out there for you to follow, that other cities have spent a tremendous amount of effort working on good neighbor policies throughout the region. And I do like the fact that staff does cite some of the other examples around the region and aspects in their good neighbor policies. I also believe that, when a project comes before you, there's a list of 10 things in this that they have to do. They have to do an air quality study, they have to do a health risk assessment, a noise impact analysis, a construction traffic control plan, a traffic study, a stacking and queuing study, a water supply assessment, a sewer study, an economic impact study, and an energy efficiency plan. And this is something that's called out, and every project has to do that. And that's fairly routine when these type of projects come to your community. So I believe that there are many points in the development process for staff to essentially judge if a project is right for your community and the impacts it will have on your community. I do believe that the listing that relating to sensitive receptors is a little bit arbitrary. I like the fact that they are trying to find a sweet spot between dock doors, size of buildings, and the need for setbacks. But I think these studies really get you there without having an arbitrary number in there. And of course, we as an industry are very much concerned with a 1,000-foot setback. And we're also concerned what goes in that 1,000 feet between the dock door and the sensitive receptor. What I mean, what goes in there is what type of development can be there. Very little types of development can occur, and certainly housing can occur, parks can occur, because those are all sensitive receptors. So those are things that you as a community, I believe, should be concerned about. And we as an industry ask you and respectfully ask you to continue the discussion on this. Let's get this right. And we as an industry are here and willing to work with you. We did have an opportunity to speak with staff and had a meeting, and I think that was productive, but I do believe more time is needed. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you tonight, and if there's any questions, I'll be either available now or after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blankenship. Do we have any other public comments?
None here. Any phone calls?
We have one caller on the line.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we have one caller on the line. Transferring them now.
I'm trying to connect.
He's transferring them.
He's
right now.
transferring.
Okay. Hello?
Caller, are you there?
Caller? It says ringing.
Okay, okay.
It's ringing, but I'm not getting a.
Caller, can you hear us? Caller?
Why don't we go ahead with the staff report, and then we'll see if we can get the caller back online before council discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Taylor.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So under the purpose and applicability sections, which is the first page of the policy, not much was changed, just a little tidying up on some grammar and words. As we look into the analysis section, item number 5 was updated to specify level of service C, which was something that came up in discussion at the last meeting. Then the number 6 was added to include a stacking or queuing study. And that speaks specifically to what one of the public commenters referenced, as well as other things that we've talked about. We've had these conversations before, not just with industrial uses, but uses in general. making sure that we have adequate on-site stacking, adequate on-site availability for vehicles waiting to enter a facility, so that they're not backed up onto the public street or public right-of-way and impacting other vehicle traffic.
Ms. Taylor, before you continue, on item 5, you said it was adjusted to level service C. What was it before?
It just generally referenced level of service as specified in the general plan.
Okay. And if you have other changes, please tell us what the changes are.
Sure.
What they used to be, so we don't waste your time. Thank you.
Yes. So 6 was new, so that was newly added.
Okay.
And then 7, 8, and 9 just updated. So economic impact study, the language was updated to specify that at a minimum, the study shall provide a cost for service analysis, estimate of revenue generated, anticipated property tax revenue, and any other information necessary to provide a comprehensive evaluation of the fiscal impacts to the city. So we tightened that language up to reference a little bit more of what we're looking to see in that document. Number 10 for the energy efficiency plan, it was just tidying up some language, no substantive changes to the content in that one. And then on to the construction phase. In item number 1, we had previously had some information in there just requesting that the equipment be CARB compliant. After further discussion and research, what we discovered was that if a piece of construction equipment is registered in the state of California, it is CARB compliant. So we thought that including that the owner or operator provide a copy of the current registration would be the most effective way to determine that a piece of construction equipment was going to meet the CARB compliance requirements as far as air quality. So if it's not registered in California, then they would have to provide other proof showing that the engine meets what CARB requires for compliance. Further down at number 5, in the same section, we added a statement saying that all water quality requirements and best practices shall be adhered to throughout the construction phase.
And which item was that?
That was number 5 in the same section under construction phase.
Okay, I would like the council to know that I'm comfortable with an open discussion, so you have a question, as I do, as we move forward. If anyone has a question so far, if you'd like to raise that, Mr. Lara?
So if you can quickly go back to number 9, economic impact study.
Yes.
So I know sometimes developers will build spec buildings or what they call shell only. So would we go back, how would staff address that at this time?
So ideally, staff would take one of two approaches. We would either have the study include the very lowest possible amount of improvement, like tax or, and assuming zero sales tax, right, if there's no point of sale, so that we did not overestimate or over-anticipate what a project could provide. Or we could ask them to provide different levels of, if this operator comes in, this is what it would look like. If this operator came in, this is what it would look like, so that we have some idea. But still understanding that if there's no tenant identified, essentially we're only looking at property tax.
Right. The reason I think this is important, because I think there would be a tendency to overestimate the number of jobs and the amount of taxes developed. So I do like going with the lowest common denominator or a series of, so that you can see what the lowest would be, and then again what the highest would be. But we can, I guess, determine that, or have staff determine that. Thank you.
All right. See no other questions right now.
Okay. So on down to siting and design. And again, this is where the bulk of the discussion occurred last time, as well as the bulk of the public comments that we've received. So number 1 speaks to the truck bays and loading docks being a minimum of 1,000 feet from the property line of any sensitive receptor to the nearest dock door. So what staff attempted to do in the report was provide some red line comments on what other cities are doing, as well as what other suggestions are. So we identified 4 cities that have similar types of ordinances or regulations or policies in place. Fontana had come up before in our previous discussion, as they had received clearance from the Attorney General's office that their 300-foot separation was adequate. The city of Rialto has a fairly robust series of ordinances or codes addressing these types of uses, storages, warehouse, et cetera. And they have a different formula, so their setback is based on building height on a foot for foot with no less than 25-foot minimum. Then looking at Paris, Paris has a wide variety of options there, so they set different increments. They have maximum of 100 feet above grade. They have some other options that they use. They also have a ratio for setbacks, 1 foot for every 2 foot of increase beyond the standard height set forth in their zoning table. And then Palm Desert, again, setback equal to the building height. So we found that that seems to be a pretty common theme in some of those cities. City of Paris also did an air quality comparative study, I guess would be the best way to call it, of their air quality versus Moreno Valley and some of the surrounding areas. And what I found interesting in their study was not so much the air quality data itself, which is what we all pretty much know, but the analysis that they came to was that up to about a 750,000 square foot industrial building, when you're looking at a commercial center of about 40 acres versus a 750,000 square foot industrial building, or when you're looking at a residential, like higher density development of a similar size that you would find with a building comparative to the 750,000 square feet, the industrial building actually generated, less of an air quality issue just based on how we calculate now VMT versus like level of service. So when you're looking at it strictly as a trips per day type scenario. Once you get over that threshold, then things did change a little bit. Another thing that staff did, because the question of bay doors or how many bay doors came up, we went ahead and pulled the developments that we have that are existing and that are proposed and tried to calc out an average number of bay doors per square foot of industrial building, right? Because we wanted to not address it from an arbitrary standpoint, but try and look at, what do we really have here? And so what staff found is that it's approximately 1 bay door per 6,000 square foot of building space. Now, we didn't differentiate between whether it's the office component or, the warehouse building. We just took straight square footage and number of bay doors. So what we found at that 1 to 6,000 ratio, I broke it up then from that point and went with 500,000 square feet or 80 bays, right? Because that's about what you see on a cross dock. You typically have 40 on each side then, 40 bay doors on each side. And then went up to 750,000 square feet with 125 bay doors, and then 1 million square feet would have, maybe 166 bays plus or minus on up. So I broke those down for distances using some of the information that was given as feedback from the last meeting. And that was the best approach I could think of to try and come up with something that was not entirely arbitrary. So those are the main discussion points, the main additions in the red line, and I'm happy to answer any questions or entertain any discussion on that before we move on.
Mayor, we also have the caller back on the line.
Okay, let's take a break and take the caller.
Mr. Melman, the AV room is going to patch him in.
Caller, can you hear me? Hello?
Jamie, do we have the caller on the line?
Any discussion on that?
Hi, are you there?
Yeah.
Hi, you have city council.
Go ahead, Mr. Roy.
Take a break, take the caller.
Okay. Mr. Melman, the AV room is going to patch them in.
Mr. Roy, can you mute your YouTube or your background playing, please?
Yes, yeah,
Thank you.
just a second here. Hold it. Okay.
Mr. Roy?
Okay, you're good to go.
Yes, council, thank you. After reviewing tonight's attachments, I have concerns. I submitted written comments to address them, but to summarize, okay, this does have some meat. Okay, that's a plus. However, the first thing is to ensure that the provisions you're putting into use wording that creates enforceability rather than just toothless suggestive guidelines. Also, the city needs to contain warehouses to certain geographic areas, and so I've identified those areas. And so there's two districts. One is an industrial district, one in South Beaumont. It's an area bounded by SR 60 to the north, 4th Street to the south, Jackrabbit Trail to the west, and Veely Avenue to the east. So that's the first district. And the other I call mixed-use area, and it's just next to I-10. It's an area bounded by I-10 to the north, 1st Street to the south, Beaumont Avenue to the west, and the western boundary of Home Depot would be the eastern boundary. Okay, so that you just have two districts now. You're going to contain the growth, and you shouldn't have, pick 10% of the total land use of the city or 10 million square feet, whichever is lower. I have that in my comments. So you need more balanced land use. You don't want to become a warehouse town. Okay, so, and so also the city needs to be more aggressive at ensuring adequate alternative use analysis. So applicants need to show in extensive detail comparative sites that would be used within a 50-mile radius for logistics use similar to the project. These alternatives should show their location, legal description, market valuations, and drawings that show their viability in the alternative sites. Developers ignore this all the time. Okay, also a 1,000-foot buffer needs to be established between a project and surrounding sensitive receptors. Now make sure that the legally described real property boundary of a logistics property is the basis for measuring the 1,000-foot buffer distance from the project to sensitive receptors. So what some developers will do is I'll take the edge of the building, and the building could be like 300 feet from the boundary line. Pick the boundary line. I probably exceeded my time. Just cut me off when you need to. But another part is we need to develop city ordinances to protect the workers' rights and the working conditions. Almost all high-cube warehouses have no HVAC, yet workers are in South Beaumont right now when it's over 100 degrees. How'd you like to work in that condition? So make sure there's a design plan of drawings that would show a layout that shows the quantity of break areas, locker rooms, bathrooms, showers.
Mr. Roy, you
Okay,
need
wrap it up.
to, Mr. Roy, you need to wrap that up, please.
No, that's fine. You cut me off.
Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you for your
time.
comments. Okay, where were we?
So we were going to entertain some discussion on this siting and design component.
Okay. Mr. Lara, you're up.
Really quickly, if you can go back to the dust control measure, it's item 4, just above site design. One thing that I've seen done is they make sure that a contact information is posted on site so that if you do have a dust event and people are complaining, then there is somebody that you can call that will address that. Just a thought. So I went onto the AQMD website when we first looked at this, and what I found on their website was, based on their studies, is 500 feet is the minimum, that's where they start. So I don't know how the other cities, I guess they're not bound by AQMD studies, correct? They can use them as a guide if they wanted to.
Yes, exactly.
So.
Yeah, and I think that study is It's pretty old as well, so
Is
things
it?
may have changed, yeah, since then.
Okay. But it was I just found it interesting that none of the examples that you gave or any of the cities that you gave even followed the AQMD study at all. When you look at sensitive receptors and it looks like what you're going to go ahead and do is, let's just say you have a proposed warehouse facility, and I know that we're pulling the measurement from the bay doors. You're going to pull, if you have vacant property, let's just say it's zoned for residential, you're going to pull to the property line for that 1,000-foot, because at that point, we don't know what tract development, what the houses will look like, what the distance to homes are. So what you're calling out is to the property line, correct?
Yeah, that's what we would have to do if the property is
Okay.
vacant.
I'm sorry, say that again, please. What was your question?
The question is when you have a vacant piece of property that's adjacent to a proposed warehouse.
Okay,
You're going to pull the distance from the bay door, if it's 1,000 foot is what we land on, you'll go 1,000 feet from there to the actual property line rather than the actual sensitive receptor, say it's a school building or a house.
okay.
That's the way it reads right now. It reads that loading docks shall be a minimum of 1,000 feet from the property line of the sensitive receptor to the nearest dock door.
Okay.
Which I think is good, because it covers a concern that I had in regards to vacant property.
Before we move on to that, are you aware of any where they've measured from the bay doors to the closest receptor, or is it all to the property line?
It's generally to the property line, and the best of what I found in the last few weeks that I've been digging into this is what's in this
Okay.
policy here.
Okay, thank you.
In regards to the sensitive receptor, I do like what you have as far as the breakdown. I don't think I've ever come across at least our table of 500,000 square foot warehouse. I think it's 600, 700,000 is typically.
Yeah, right. And we have some that are around that 500,000 mark that are already constructed and operating. They're older. The
Okay.
ones that we have coming in now, I think the smallest one we have is 600,000-ish. We have two of those that are in the entitlement process at some point, and then everything else is
Okay.
way bigger.
Okay, well, I do like the effort that you put into that. However, I'm still leaning towards the 1,000 foot from sensitive receptor at this point. That's all I have right now, Mayor.
That's 1,000 feet to the property line.
Correct, sir.
Okay, and the adjacent property is qualified as a sensitive receptor then?
If it is qualified as a sensitive receptor, then
Okay.
yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Lar, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. Thank
Okay,
you.
Mr. Martinez.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So keeping the 1,000-foot discussion, we had asked for kind of a compromise, and the sliding scale looks like that's the compromise. I prefer the idea here of square footage in bay versus height to distance ratio myself. Now, looking at this 500 square feet, 80 bay, what we're looking at is a stepped type of a scale where the bigger you are, the further you're away. So you have a 1 million square foot building or a 166 bay, we ask for 1,000 feet. But the smaller the building, the closer we can have. So I think that is a good compromise because you still allow the 1,000 feet that the public really has put input that they really support. But we also compromise with the industry saying, okay, we understand that if you have a smaller footprint and 750 versus 1 million is not really that much smaller, but at least we show a compromise in having a 500 foot versus 1,000. I mean, that's quite a bit of a reduction. So I would be willing to support this in this type of a scale rather than say 1,000 outright if we wanted to show that we're being good stewards with the industry. But I think we have to remember that we are in the point where we want to draft what not only our residents want, but what we think we want as well. And if we think the 1,000 foot is something that we're going for, then I think we should be there. You know, and I'm not the one to say, well, I don't see any other cities doing it. I don't care about the other cities. I want to know what we want as our city and what our residents want. And if they want 1,000 foot, then we put 1,000 foot. So, you know, we'll discuss, I think, whether we're hardline on that number period or whether we like the sliding. I'm okay with the sliding as long as the 1,000 stays in there for the larger buildings. But I don't think we should start saying, well, there's nowhere that says 1,000 foot, no one else is doing that. Again, I don't care. I care about what our residents want, and I care about what we want as a council. So that's my answer.
So, for clarification, either Ms. Taylor or Mr. Martinez, if you have a property that has a 500,000 square foot building and a 750,000 square foot building, are we going with 1,000 feet from bay to sensitive receptor, or are we, I mean, how are we, because most of ours are coming in with multiple buildings, correct?
Correct. I mean, I would interpret that as your 500,000 square foot building could be a little closer, your 750 would need to be pushed back a little further. And typically, we do see a staggered design when you see a layout of multiple buildings coming in on a site. You have, you know, one in front of the other, or you have them, you know, long ways, flipped around, or, you know, it would be up to the person or the designer to accommodate. But my interpretation would be, we're talking about structure size, not site alone, in case, unless council wanted to make that a different point of clarification in the policy.
And Mayor, that my comment is also on that point is if you want to stick with the number to, you know, avoid confusion, then you just put out a number and say, this is what we're going to go with. And you can avoid that type of a loophole, I guess you can create.
Yeah, my concern was that I think we're all going to be more acceptable to multiple smaller buildings rather than one huge mega building. And so I just want to know, I want us to recognize that the decisions we make here may have unintended consequences if we don't think about it properly.
And I appreciate that. So on that note, I would have to put in there a total square footage of the project to avoid that. So
But I
if you're-
think that would drive developers to a massive, large building.
Well, but I mean, if you decide to go 3 small buildings to keep the 300 feet instead of having one major building at 1,000 feet, to me, it's still leaving a large footprint. You're just dividing it into smaller buildings.
But if the major building is, if the major building is 1 million square feet and they have to do 1,000-foot receptor, my concern is they're going to say, okay, well, if we have to do 1,000 feet anyways, let's go to a 2 million square foot building.
Well, and we can have a sliding scale. You know, my concern was if you're going to have 3 smaller buildings and you're trying to get to the 500 feet, you're still having, the bays are still going to add up and you're still going to have the truck traffic there. So the whole idea of keeping them away from the sensitive receptors is for that, you know, for the air quality and so forth. So
Okay.
that was what I was concerned of. But if you're saying, well, if I'm going to go 1 million, I might as well go 2 million.
That's what my thought
You know,
is.
I don't think we really can.
There might be more of an incentive to go with 3 or 4 smaller buildings.
As long as they add up, you know, and the whole project to me is taken into consideration, so we don't create a loophole.
So you
by
would want
saying-
this tiered approach to be total square footage as opposed to
I would.
That's what
individual
Mr.
buildings.
Martinez would like.
I would
Okay.
approve.
Yeah.
I would like
I
that.
think I'd like to think about that a little bit more, because again, I just see, you know, the impact. One thing I want to address, I'm sorry, are you
Oh,
done?
go ahead. No, I am.
Okay,
Thank
so
you, Mayor.
one thing I wanted to address was Mr. Roy's comments. The reason I think the council agreed to my suggestion that we go this direction, that we create some kind of rules and guidelines, is right now we don't have any, correct?
Yeah, we just have basic development standards in the zoning code.
And we are not in a position as a council to get into the weeds and the details and the feet and the, you know, the number of bays and things like that. That is something that's left to the planning commission. Well,
Yeah, typically it's addressed at the staff level. So we don't have any guiding document like this that would say, or that would regulate anything. So whether it's a 100,000 square foot building or it's a 1 million square foot building, the development standards in the code are applied equitably regardless. So, and there's no reference to number of bays or number of buildings. It's purely based on your setbacks and your zoning.
my concern is, I mean, the whole purpose of this was to send a vision to the planning commission of what we would like to see happen in our city. A concern I have that's been raised before in a couple comments that were made tonight, one by you and one by, I think, one of the speakers, is I'm concerned that we're get into just a total arbitrary decision. I think the original comment that was made the first time we discussed this was that 1,000 feet is arbitrary. Mr. Lara brought up the fact that the AQMD study showed a different number, and you brought up the fact that the AQMD study was old. And so my question to you is 1,000 feet, is there a I'm not real confident with science these days, but is there a scientific reason for 1,000 versus 500?
So I am not an air quality expert, meaning I don't have a degree in chemistry or biology or anything like that. Air is fluid. It's going to move. The science has shown that the further away you get from the origin point, the more it dissipates. So from that standpoint, obviously, yeah, the further away you are from a sensitive receptor, the better it is for the sensitive receptor, right? But from a planning standpoint, I put some maps in the staff report that show kind of what the city has now. And the city has a very clearly defined industrial area where the majority of the buildings that are either existing or proposed in that area would essentially meet or come very close to meeting the 1,000-foot radius. The exceptions would be like your Amazon and Hidden Canyon, which is Amazon Part 2 that's being built up there. And even though they're slightly under 1,000 foot on the radius, they're separated by State Route 60. They're separated by a freeway. So that essentially negates, in my opinion anyway, the concern of being within 1,000 feet. In the Barrio area, you have just a very little bit of overlap. And let me see, most of those buildings that are constructed in there are much smaller warehouses, and they tend to house operations of contractors or engineers or mom and pop sort of businesses like that. The closest thing that you would have into that area is getting into the parking lot of like CJ Foods and the Lowe's distribution and whatnot. They're near Nicholas and 4th. So, I don't know that it's arbitrary based on our existing layout of what we have already. The question really comes in with future development. If developers would like to go in areas that are not part of this designated area, how is that going to come into play?
But you bring up a good question, and Mr. Roy also brought up the concept of warehouse districts or logistics districts. Isn't it arbitrary to say that a warehouse south of the 60 that's right next to the 60, where there's tens of thousands of trucks going by every day between that warehouse and the community on the other side of the 60, is there a scientific reason for saying that the air quality coming from the trucks coming in there are going to impact the community more than the tens of thousands of trucks that go by each day?
It's a very common conversation that occurs at AQMD and at CARB. LA, the city of LA, in those urban areas that are very far west of here, are now addressing that through environmental justice type activities. So the science is there that say, yeah, you've got a sensitive receptor, it is affected. Is 1,000 foot the distance that they're talking about? Not necessarily.
Okay. And the other comment that you had brought up was the less than other uses air quality question that came up. That's where I get concerned about the arbitrary. I do like the idea of the sliding scale. I think that makes more sense. So let me address this at a different level. I think we've had a lot of discussion. One of the goals of this committee was to look into a logistics mitigation fee. And so I want to know where we are on that and what's the time frame on that. And the idea for those who are just listening for the first time is that we have a separate mitigation fee for logistics industries to provide the community benefit. And I bring up community benefit because you actually brought it up here in, or I think Mr. Lara addressed it in the economic impact study. I mean, because what we want to look at is not only what's the impact on our economy, but what benefit there is to the city, or is there a benefit to a city to encouraging logistics of any kind? Some people would say not at all. But I think I'd like to get a little more insight onto where we are on the mitigation study.
So we're still a ways out on bringing anything back to council for that. The first thing that you'll see, and that we're currently working with someone informally at this point on, is the options for what that fee structure could look like. So there are a number of jurisdictions, both regional, like COG version of that, Central California, as well as some other areas around here that have different types of fee programs for community benefit. Some are tied specifically to improvements that cities have identified they want done, and that would have to be done through the Nexus study process. Other fee programs, which is actually what I'm working with a consultant on, trying to get a framework of what that would look like, is more of a volunteer type program. And volunteer sounds, oh, how do we make them, how do we make a developer participate? But I don't want to go too much into it because, again, it's something relatively new to me as well. But essentially, it requires certain payments or fees towards community benefit projects, but it gives much more latitude for city and city council to determine how and where within the community those funds are spent. And so we're still working on that. I'm hoping before the end of the year we will have something back to you on that. But the first thing we'll have to do is determine which approach we want to take. Do we want to go with a voluntary route where we won't necessarily have to tie it to a Nexus study per se, or do we want to go with something hard and fast where we've identified improvements that need to be done that we're not currently collecting fees on, and want to perform a Nexus study to then identify those costs and figure out what that would look like per development.
So I'm assuming in a voluntary model, you're going to have a case-by-case negotiation between the developer and
Correct.
the planning commission, not the developer and the city council.
Typically, these projects would come to city council for final approval, and in a lot of cases, a development agreement would be the tool that we would use to institute a voluntary participation in a community benefit program. And so that is something that would come to city council.
But have we in the past, I don't know that I remember any, and I'm getting old, so my memory may be off a little bit, but most often when a decision like this on logistics comes to council, we're not deciding the number of bays, the square footage setback. That's all decided by planning commission and staff.
Yes.
And so those don't come to us unless there's an appeal or something like that, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then two other things, and then I'll turn it back over to the other comments here. So in a couple of meetings ago, I asked that we look at the options of creating our no truck zones in our community, because my concern is it really doesn't matter a whole lot. I mean, it does matter a whole lot what we can do here in the city of Beaumont, but when you have our neighbors on both sides going all out with very little impact to our community, they don't need to take into account our community as far as whether or not Singleton Road becomes full of warehouses or Sun Lakes Boulevard fills up with warehouses. So, I asked that we talked about a truck route. would prefer, also the question that was brought up by Mr. Castaldo tonight was the idea of offset parking. I don't think that's addressed in here either. And then the last piece is, I really believe that the Nexus study is the way to go. I think that we should do that as opposed to a case-by-case, because if we want to send a mission or a statement to our planning commission on the direction we want to head, I don't see how we work this all in separate pieces. So that was just my comments. Mr. Lara, I see you wanted to speak again?
Yes, please. Back on the setbacks or the distance to sensitive receptors. So Mayor brought up a good point, and so did Mayor Pro Tem Martinez in regards to multiple buildings having the sliding scale. But when you stop and you look at that, at least in the projects that I've seen, and if you go with an accumulative square footage, every project's going to tip the 1 million square foot. I mean, you could do a 500,000, a 600,000, and 800,000. That's 1.9. You're done. So, to me, and then the mayor brought up a concern in regards to a 2 million square foot. But I think at 1,000-foot distance, whether it's a 2 million or a 1 million or 1.5 million, you're really not going to see that building, which is something else that I kind of like, because when you go to certain other areas, they have warehouses that you can't tell are warehouses, and they're a setback from the street, they're set back from sensitive receptors, they're well landscaped. So I was for the sliding scale, but I don't think the sliding scale will work because every project is going to come in at over 1 million square foot of warehouse, whether it's one building or 3 buildings or 4 buildings, they're all going to tip the scales at over 1 million. I think some of the ones that I've seen in DRC have been 2.1, 10.
5, we have
5.
5.5, 10,
So,
10 to 20.
Which is kind of why I'm leaning towards the 1,000-foot distance to a sensitive receptor. Because when you read on into the site design, which I thought was done very well, you get into the landscaping, or you can do the berms, and you can reduce footage by using the berms or using your landscaping to reduce that footage. So that's another reason why I still kind of lean towards the 1,000. So if you're going to do the sliding scale and you're going to do it based on a total square footage, it just kind of defeats its purpose.
A question, Mr. Lara, if I may, Mayor, is when you're talking about the buildings, though, you're talking about buildings with bays, not just any building. So if they had a building that they have with bays, but then they build a commercial building or something, that wouldn't count towards this because we're talking about bays, or are we talking about square footage? Because now you lost me.
So, I'm sorry. So typically warehouses are going to have bays because they're going to ship, right? So those are the buildings I'm talking about. And typically the projects that I've seen have all been multiple warehouse buildings on the same site.
Oh, I see.
So I haven't seen, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, where you have warehouse facility and office buildings.
Oh, okay. Well, so the only thing I just want to mention, if I may, is that, so if you have a cumulative total and it measures to 1 million, then you're back to your 1,000.
Right.
But the sliding scale allows that 750 building, that's all they want, to not have to go by 1,000. They can go by the 500. So that's what I'm saying. It allows those projects that are a little smaller that little bit of a difference.
Right.
But if you're going to have 3 750 square foot, next to each
Right.
other, then you want that cumulative total because they shouldn't get the 500. They should get the 1,000 because it goes by
Right.
that bay thing. So my thing is that you're saying 1,000 overall, which I'm okay with, but I don't know how the council's going to go with that. So
Right.
if we want to talk about a compromise, I think we can go back to that sliding scale because you're still going to get your 1,000 if you have multiple buildings.
Yeah, and if we look at the sliding scale, I wouldn't go below 500 because of the AQMD study.
Okay.
That's just my thought, but.
Okay, no, I appreciate that.
If you bring up a good point, I think I tried to raise it before, is that you might encourage someone to stay under 750 because of the fact that they can take advantage of more space. But if we're going to make a decision, like you just said, on 500 based on the AQMD study, we need a more current AQMD study. to make that decision.
If I may interject here, I don't know if this is going to help or make things worse for you guys, but I'm just going to throw it out. So, to Mayor's point, we will have an updated air quality study project specific with every EIR. So, the AQMD's baseline study or overall study that they have related to mobile sources and stationary sources, which is part of what Councilmember Lahr is referring to, that is dated, but new data is collected for every project and provided. And since these projects typically do come to council, if these are set, again, in a policy, these are essentially guidelines that staff will use for baseline analysis of a project. But we still have the fiscal analysis that we can look at. We still have the opportunity for enhanced features that may reduce the need for such extreme separations. And it may become just a counterpoint on discussion and analysis overall, where the merits of a project could very well outweigh that extra 300 feet, from that 1,000 to 750. If we're talking, a point of sale, or if we, are getting a large amount of sales, or not sales tax, but property tax. And typically with these types of uses, there are less calls for service, so there tends to be more money retained by the city as opposed to spent on other items. So the policy does, I fully understand and appreciate the discussion on all of the opportunities and distances that could be established, but you as council really will have a lot of latitude to make a comprehensive decision on what would work best based on the tools and information that are set in this policy.
So it was brought up, Mr. Lahr, you brought it up. Where are we on the idea that if I'm a developer and I don't want to stick to the 1,000 square feet, I can do a berm, I can do walls? Are we still leaving that flexibility into
Yeah,
the guidelines?
it's in the policy.
Okay, so we're still going in that direction. Any other comments? Mr. Finn?
Question for staff. Do we know what the minimum distance a warehouse is needed for a truck bay, for the trailers to pull in, park, and so forth? I know a trailer can be 53 feet long, then you've got the tractor on top of that. If you've got multiple bays in a row, they can't do a hard turn, so they have to pull out most of the way and then turn. So I would think at a minimum, they'd probably need 100 feet, between the dock and a barrier of some sort.
Yeah.
Do you have that info? Or?
I don't know offhand what the minimum or the average would be. We typically don't see them right on PL because, again, trucks are so big. There are so many that are coming in, filtering into a site. Turning radiuses, all of those things that have to be factored into how a site's designed to accommodate that. But we typically do not see, on large-scale buildings like this, you don't see the bays right up against a property line.
Okay, because the reason why I bring it up is if our goal is to keep these vehicles away from sensitive receptors, we need to keep that in mind. I like seeing the alternative choice of this sliding scale, but that 300 feet I think is eaten up just in the logistics of pulling a truck in there, and so it's really not that far away. I appreciate the comments that were made previously. I like the fact that there's the examples of what it looks like with the existing projects there and how far the 1,000 feet goes out. In some cases, it crosses the freeway where the existing warehouses are. But man, the bigger the warehouse, the closer it looks to you. If you're in Olivewood and you look across the freeway, that Amazon warehouse looks like it's in your front yard. And so, without having the science behind it, but with keeping the public in mind in terms of noise, sight, and health risks and so forth, I would still support the being a minimum of 1,000 feet. And obviously, we can't change anything that's currently there or under construction or approved and not quite yet built and so forth. But the feedback that I've heard is, we're a bedroom community, we're a place to raise children, we're a place to retire in. We don't need to be a warehouse community. And so I don't mind that extra restriction. and have it be a simple, easily understood. If the council were to agree on maybe a little less than 1,000 feet, I might go for that. But I would like to see a firm number that staff can have conversations with, and that be their line in the sand with any future projects. When it's gray area, it's a lot of time, a lot of effort, and maybe even time wasted on projects where it may end up coming to the council and just getting denied. Where if it was a hard, fast rule, then perhaps maybe it gets sent back, redesigned, and a new project come forward that meets everybody's requirements. So that's my comments.
Mr. Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question on comment on this. I mean, we're concentrating on the warehouses. Actually, I like the way it was written in here, and actually the some is the industrial on this. So it means like the CJ, they're industrial. They're no warehouse. I mean, I think we have to classify that to the council on that. Probably there are square footage in there, probably around 500,000 or 600,000. I'm just guessing on that. I don't know the exact. And then you got the Rudolph in there. The same situation. I mean, they're not warehouse. They're on the way I see it, they're manufacturing industrial. But now everybody's jumping on the Amazon. I do believe on that. I mean, you go on East Bale, and they're huge. I mean, they have a setback in there. It's only 300 feet on the sensitive on that. That's why, just like Councilman Fan mentioned, that it's right there on your backyard. And I'm glad that we're discussing this. But the thing is, the way I see it on this, because I grew up, when I say grew up, I do manage industrial manufacturing. I got 6 bay to 12 bay in LA itself. So we got train on the back, and then we got the some of the trucks on the front, and we have regulations that we have to stay that truck only. When I say truck, the hauling and everything within 15 minutes. They have to all haul out and everything in there within 15 minutes to 25 minutes. That's the regulation in LA. Now, back in here, I'm leaning on the the tiers, the way you guys put it together. It does make sense. I mean, the 1 million here, I know there's some proposal at 2.8 million coming up on this, on you guys. I mean, how are we gonna handle that? I mean, I like the 1,000 tiers on here, and I think it will make sense. And then at the same time, so those track, we have to, discipline them. And us as a council, we have to put a regulations and now to discipline them. And as I said, all of this, industrial, and there will be a commercial on that, industry. The warehouses, it's not only warehouses, we got the industrial and also the commercial. So I'm looking on the, heavily on the way you set it up, the tiers in here. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Lard, did you have any last comments?
Yeah, on a different topic on the same item, is that all right? Or just want to wait and get this?
No, let me make a couple comments. I'll let you have the last word, maybe. So I agree that I think we really need to be careful about the 500 versus 1,000 and what possible ramifications they are. I think the fact that we have the flexibility that even if we require 1,000 feet, that there can be mitigation measures made by the developer that would allow the Planning Commission to read into what we're doing here. The caller, Mr. Roy, brought up the idea of the accountability, and people need to understand that this is a guide, and that a new council with 3 votes can throw it all out the window. I want to get it right. So a real quick question, and this is one I came up, Mr. Finn brought up, and then I'll finish my comments and hand it over to Mr. Lara. Where does this impact projects that are in the works? In other words, if they've already, I need to get an idea of where this applies to projects. When does it start or stop?
So from when council chooses to adopt the policy formally, it would take effect from that point forward. So any project that we have that's currently filed, anywhere from just filed with an assigned and going through the DRC process through any formal entitlement or scheduling that's already occurred, it would not apply to anything else. So we specifically worded that it would affect projects from adoption point forward.
Okay, and the number that we heard over the last couple of months was that there's 30 million square feet coming for, is that 30 million all would be grandfathered in under, before we, whatever we do at this point?
Yeah, so we have, I believe, somewhere between 20 and 30 million square feet of industrial that this would not apply to at this
Okay.
point.
So, and this is my last comment. I think that we need to get this right. And I think to get it right, we need to look at it we need to give you direction on whether or not to do a nexus study. I don't think we can do that tonight. I think that has to be an agenda item for it. I would also like to see the discussion on what kind of control we have over our own truck lanes, our lanes, our roads, as they would be impacted by our neighbors. That is some control that I think we should be able to have. And I think that we're getting close to the point where we're, if you bring this back, you're not bringing it back at the next council meeting. It's going to be a couple council meetings. And I wonder if maybe we should wait until a new council is seated and let this decision, we can continue to do the work on it and continue to bring the project. I would like to get the nexus study up and going before there is a new council. But I wonder if maybe at this point, we don't need to rush this and maybe we let the new council decide. And that is, those comments all about timing is for the rest of the council. It's not for staff. I want to know what the rest of you think about that. So I'll let Mr. Lara go first, and then I'll let the rest of you weigh in.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Really quickly, aside from the sensitive receptor, item 7, 36-inch box. I'd rather determine a diameter of tree rather than a box size. I've seen some spindly trees put in 48-inch boxes. So if we go by trunk diameter, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, the reason it's worded that way at this point is because currently the landscape code
References box.
references box. If at some point we are able to update the code, then staff would also be in favor of moving in that direction to reference it by diameter. The only way that we address that at this point is asking for delivery receipts of what has been provided to the project site, so that we can see number of trees, shrubs, box size, gallon size, et cetera.
Okay, so perhaps we can look at that in some future time, but leave it at box.
Yes, sir.
The other item, page, I think it's 778, item 13. I think operation was supposed to be slid down because then you start the counting sequence all over. Okay.
Yep.
I really like what you've done here, Christina. My preference would not to be to delay it because we've already got 30 million square foot of warehouse in. Delays are only going to add more square footages of warehouse. And at some point, and I don't even know if the warehouses that are proposed are within the city limits or not. But I think the sooner we give staff the tools to work with as they get applications, I think the better off we are. I think based on Mayor's comments, this is going to be a very dynamic document. So we could turn around and approve, I'm just speaking hypothetically, if we approve this, we could add the nexus study to this. It doesn't mean it just stays static as it is. but at least we have a tool that staff can use as we move forward through the process, is my thought. And we could add anything else that council thinks is necessary. I believe we appointed 2 council members to a committee. I think they developed a great product. I do like the plan acronym better than the lump, but that's a conversation for different
Yeah,
days. But
there are a
I do
few
like,
naming options for you guys too, before you're done with this item.
so I do like the fact that we have something that council has worked on with staff that I think is very close to moving forward. And those are my comments, Mayor.
Okay, and just for clarification, we have nothing to approve tonight, correct?
That's totally at council's discretion. So if you feel ready to approve any version of this, I can strike and amend and do whatever, or if you would like it to come back further down the road.
But we don't have anything definite here that we can actually approve.
Yeah, it's written. It's written, other than the suggestions we talked about, the sliding scale.
Right,
So if
that-
we say, yeah, we want that, or we want that, you know, we can improve that now, because everything's been redlined and been rewritten.
Okay, Mr. Martinez.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I do agree with Councilmember Lara. I do think delaying is probably not the thing to do, especially when you find out you've got 30 million already exempt. You know, it's really not a good message to send to the public by keeping to stall this. If council agrees on waiting until the 20th to come back with everything, I'm okay with that, but I'm also okay with approving it today. You know, we'll have to do this.
Where do we approve? The 500, 1,000?
Well, we'd have to come up and make a motion and say, we agree this with this, and then see who buys it or not. But I think we're at that point where we do need to go forward. I don't think there's no reason to keep waiting. It was mentioned about getting more data and stuff on this. This is a policy that we're creating as a council. And you mentioned the further future council. If we approve this now and the future council comes in and doesn't like it, they're going to change it anyway. So whether we wait for them to come in or do it now and wait for them to change it, it's going to amount to the same thing. So I'm for moving faster, at the very latest, the 20th of September, to finalize this would be my suggestion, at the very latest.
Okay, Mr. Finn.
Yes, thank you. Question for staff. So we have 20 to 30 million square feet in the pipeline. To help us better understand what is the potential out there, without annexation, without any changes to the general plan, are we another 20 to 30 million? Is there 100 million? Is there 5 million left? So my question is, the majority already in the pipeline if there's no annexation and no change in the plan?
No, so if there are no annexations, then that drastically reduces the available land for large-scale development. So of that 20 to 30 million that's in the pipeline, probably 20 to 25 million of that is potentially annexable into the city. The city would have to choose to annex that as part of the entitlement process.
Okay, so outside of that, remaining land left over that is zoned for this without any changes from council, is there anything left to be built?
Yeah, it's just on a much smaller scale.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so as it stands now with zoning in its place, the majority has already been accounted for to this point. It's a safe assumption?
Yeah, fairly safe, yes.
Okay. All right, that gives me mixed signals on the do it now or do it later, but I will make a comment that I will not be here on the 20th. And with that, I'm going to step out and make a motion that we accept it as is with the red line changes at the 1,000 square feet, to see if I can get a second on that.
Mayor, clarification. 1,000 square feet would be at any square footage on building?
Yes, any square foot.
So without the tiers.
Correct, without the tiers.
I'll second that.
So before we go to a roll call, Mr. Santos, I think you still had a comment to make.
The quick comment I have is I agree with Councilman Larry over here of the, let's go forward. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, why delay? And that's the thing I like to say on that, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, no other comments? Okay, can we have roll call, please?
Certainly. Councilmember Lara,
Yes.
Councilmember Santos,
Aye.
Councilmember Finn,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Martinez,
Yes.
Mayor White.
Yes. We'll move on to item,
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you want to select the name now, Mayor? It can't be that difficult.
were our
It's plus or
choices?
plan.
I got a motion for that.
okay.
I like the policy on land use and sensitive receptors, or plus. So I'll make a motion to change the name to plus.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Lara,
Yes.
Councilmember Santos.
Aye.
Councilmember Finn,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Martinez.
Yes.
Mayor White.
Yes. Now can we move on to item 14?
I got this one.
Okay, item 14, League of California Cities, annual business meeting and
I know you guys. Oh, sorry.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Deputy City Clerk Nicole Wheelwright is not here tonight, so I'll be giving the staff report. So beginning tomorrow through Friday is the annual League of California Cities, otherwise known as Cal Cities. At the annual business meeting, which is the General Assembly, there is a proposal on the table that that there be an amendment to the Cal Cities bylaws, and there are two, in your packet, there are two proposed changes. The first is to formalize oversight of the Resolutions Committee by establishing the second vice president as the chair while retaining the president's authority to appoint the vice chair of the committee. And the second one is to ensure a more inclusive nominating committee. There are three other items that they're proposing to be changed in the bylaws that are non-substantive. So as it stands now, the appointed voting delegate for the city is Mayor Pro Tem Martinez, with alternate one being Councilmember Finn and alternate two being Mayor White. And so the recommended action is to direct the voting delegates to approve the proposed bylaw amendments or discuss and give direction for suggested changes. I do want to note that it will take a 2/3 vote of the Cal Cities members in order for the changes to the bylaws to go through.
So before we discuss this issue, do we have any public comments on this one? I can't imagine there would be any. So Mr. Finn, are you going to be at Cal Cities?
No, Mr. Mayor, I will not. So my question is going to be that if there's any delay or any issues that Mr. Martinez comes up with, will you be there as a potential alternate voter?
I'm the second alternate. I was going to propose that we get a different first alternate. But,
So yes, I will not be there.
okay. Either of you guys want to do it?
Wow, that's a tough crowd. Well, if the creek don't rise, I should be there, so I mean.
All right.
I'll be the first alternate.
Okay,
I'll back up.
I move we put Mike Clara as the first alternate.
Yeah, I'll back up my twin.
No, thank you, thank you.
Okay, so we have to decide how we want to, what position we want to take on these items, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you like any comments, Mayor, from?
Yeah, we have no public, we already asked public comments. Mr. Martinez.
Yeah, so I've read it over, and basically, there's just some fine tuning of changing some of the designations of the titles of the vice presidents and the way that the president appoints some of the board members. So they're really non-substantive at that point, and those are the three minor changes. On the two major bylaws, again, I've read it over. I don't see anything that's in conflict, anything that I would not support. Again, it's more of a routine formality, really, I believe. So I'm in full agreement with this, and I recommend we approve.
So I know in the past, there was one Cal Cities that we went to that we'd already done what we just did. And when the discussion started happening in the meetings, some things that we hadn't thought of came up. And there was a lot of, do you remember this one?
Yeah.
There was a lot of back and forth, and if there's four of us there, we're in a position to change our vote as a group, correct?
Who are going to be the voting delegates?
There's one per city.
Okay,
Right,
so,
so-
and then you're the alternate, is that right?
But I'm saying, can the three of us go to him and say we don't?
What I was going to suggest, and what some cities do, is they just authorize the voting delegate to vote as they deem fit when they get there.
Okay.
No pressure there. No pressure. Again, I remember that, Mayor, and that was the topic that had a lot of discussion. These, I don't think you're gonna get any discussion.
But we didn't see that coming that time.
No, that's true, and
Okay.
I'm not
No,
Nostradamus.
I'm
but
good with,
just
I'm
saying.
good with doing the way we decide to do it. So you're recommending that we vote in favor of all the items?
Yes, I do believe that.
Okay. Is that a motion?
I don't know, is there a motion or just direction? Well, I can make a motion, sure.
Yeah, why don't you make a
Yeah,
motion?
so I move that the council direct the voting delegate to approve the proposed bylaw amendments and allow the voting delegate to make the final decision. if needed.
I'll second that.
Where there were just the bylaws, there were other items?
There are two bylaws and they're all bylaw amendments
Okay.
technically.
There's 2 substantive changes
Yeah,
and 3
and 3
non-substantive.
non-substantive.
So a motion by Mr. Martinez, a second by Mr. Lara. Can we get a roll call,
Councilmember
please?
Lara?
Yes.
Councilmember Santos?
Aye.
Councilmember Finn?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Martinez?
Yes.
Mayor White?
Yes. All right, we'll move on to legislative updates and discussions. Uh-oh.
Mayor, I have no general legislative
Oh, no.
update this evening, but the chief has some items for
Got a
you.
list.
He has a minute and a half.
He has a minute and a half.
Per council member. No, so we have some, we're closing out the legislative year with some really good news. And I wanted to share that, especially with the League of Cities Conference, that you can go there armed, and that, you know what, like-minded professionals, when we come together, we advocate with our state electeds what we can accomplish. And so we had 3 top priorities at the end of this session. SB 300, which was dismissing those special circumstances for those violent killers and accomplices, and SB 299, and that was the compensation when police officers used lawful use of force. Those never even came up for a floor vote. We beat them because they didn't have the support to bring them. The other one was AB 937, and that was the sanctuary state for violent felons. And I think that was the most displeasing bill we've seen in the last 2 years. We defeated that. The advocates and the supporters of that bill did get enough votes to take it to the floor, and when it went to floor vote, it lost by 3 votes. So in Cal Chiefs, we literally called every single member of the session that we had to call. It's certainly a group effort. So looking back, we either defeated or dramatically amended every bill that we came up against. I'll cover those quickly, but not only that, we helped secure $50 million in wellness for police officers throughout the state. We funded crime task forces and retail theft operations through the governor's budget. And so these are the bills that we defeated that were significant. Radio encryption, defeated. Facial recognition ban, defeated. Low-level traffic stops, defeated. Changing the mandated school reporter for threats against staff and fellow students, defeated. Lowering the DUI penalties and decriminalizing hallucinogens, both were defeated. And then, as you know, the governor vetoed legal injection sites. And then finally, the AB 2644, the interrogation tactics, we significantly got that amended so that it just pertains to persons 17 and younger, which is already existing law. And with that, 90 seconds, good? Yeah. Questions on that, Mayor or Council?
No questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Economic development update.
Good evening, Mayor. There's no economic development update other than our regularly scheduled meeting, which would be held on September 14th, is canceled. And in lieu, there will be another downtown business meeting held at the Craft Lounge at 6 p.m., where we'll be talking about the downtown incentive programs and other related items. Everyone is welcome to join.
And Mr. Pinckney, if we have more than 2 council members there, the discussion, the idea of the meeting is to get feedback from the business owners on some of the ideas on how to spend the $500,000 that the council has committed to enhancing the downtown, things like facades, parking lots, things like that, parking restrictions. Is there a problem if more than 2 council members are there?
You can't speak at that meeting because it's a subcommittee created by the council. So I think you have a council member that's on that committee, right? You have a
Yes.
council member on it? Okay.
Yes.
And so if you go to the meeting, you can't speak.
Okay.
Because you're basically you're having a city council meeting if you do that.
Okay.
So when you form a subcommittee as a council and you attend that meeting, you cannot speak at that meeting. You can only attend to observe.
Okay, and is it a difference if there's only me showing up versus two members of economic?
No,
It's the
even
same
if it's
thing.
one.
Okay, and if we wanted to be able to speak, then we would need to brown notice the meeting?
You'd need to, yes, you'd need to notice it as a council meeting.
Not as an economic development committee meeting?
Well, if you had a majority of the council that wanted to go to that meeting and speak, then you could notice it both as an economic development committee meeting and also a council meeting, a joint meeting. You could do that.
And when you say speak, I mean, see, I would like to see as many of the council members to go there to sort of get the impact of what's going on. I think we can refrain from speaking if you mean getting up and making a comment on
Right.
one direction or the other.
Right.
But there isn't an issue if 3 of us want to go and participate in the meeting but not speak.
There's a difference, for sure, if you're going to speak at the meeting and
Okay.
you just can't do it.
Okay,
So-
but if staff runs the meeting and council does not speak at the meeting, then we're okay?
If you go to the meeting and you don't speak and you're not on the committee, you're okay, as long as you don't speak.
Okay.
You're not violating the Brown Act. But when you get up and you speak at a subcommittee of this council, then you're violating the Brown Act.
Okay. So as a member of the subcommittee, if I'm the only one who goes, I'm still not in a position to be able to speak. I just want to get clarification on that.
Are you a member?
I'm a member of the Economic Development Committee.
Well, then you can speak because
Okay.
you're a member of the
Got
committee.
it.
But
Okay.
if another council member were to go and it's a subcommittee of the council, they should not speak as part of the meeting.
Mr. Pinckney, I think for a matter of clarity, technically speaking, we've canceled the Economic Development Committee meeting and are holding a downtown business meeting in lieu of that. So this is,
It's not an actual committee
it's not an
meeting.
actual Economic Development Committee meeting. So I want to make sure everybody is clear on.
It's more of a town hall type.
Exactly. Right.
So maybe you can give us some,
It's open to the public. It's informally publicized, and we don't put out a formal notice, but staff through Economic Development Department helps facilitate with the downtown businesses on, we do a lot of meetings, small business, large business, but this is one of the times that we as staff would help facilitate bringing them together so that we could have a discussion and receive feedback on some of the items that had previously been discussed.
So it's not a committee meeting, it's a community meeting.
It's more of a community, yes, exactly.
Okay, and there's no problem with if 3 or 4 of us want to show up?
As long as you can attend, the whole council can attend. It's a
Okay.
Publicly advertised meeting in the community on an issue of community concern. You can go there and you can speak as long as you don't speak among yourselves during the meeting about issues that are germane to the city.
Okay. So I'll finish with this comment. If you can make it, please be there. Because it's the 14th, right? It's a regular night so it's a Wednesday, the 14th. We've made a significant commitment to the downtown business owners, and I think it would be, it would help a lot if as many of us could be there, were there. Say again? At the 6 PM, the 14th, at the Craft Lounge. Okay, so city treasurer report.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and City Council, good evening. I have nothing to report since we didn't have our meeting, but I do have one piece of good news for the Finance and Committee. Our alternate has accepted the position to move on. We got in contact with him, and he's accepted that he will be a member, which helps fill us in a little more.
And who is that?
That's Mr. Butler, Damian Butler.
Okay, all right, thank you. City clerk report?
Yes, I just wanted to commend the council for their appointment of Elaine Morgan as my replacement coming next year. I worked with her on the Solara HOA, and I know she'll do a heck of a job. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. City attorney report.
Nothing this evening.
City manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. In your packet tonight, the first item is an update to the park projects flyer, media, and on the back, I want to bring your attention, we updated the back of the flyer to include a more detailed update on the sports park. There's been a lot of talk in the community about the sports park. I do have some late-breaking news that just came in a half hour ago. We just found out that we have been awarded a California Parks and Recreation Society Game Time grant, a matching grant to update and improve the playground at the sports park. That's all the details I have right now. The email just came in this evening, so we'll be adding that to the park project flyer as soon as we have more information. We continue to look for ways to bring in grant money to improve our parks. The second item on your agenda is an update from me.
City manager, before you go any further.
Yes.
Since Mr. Laura and I are impacted by the next item, I think it's best that we recuse ourselves and step out while you have this discussion. So
That's because you're candidates in the.
yes, because we are candidates in
Okay.
the election. Mr. Martinez?
Is that where you were going to the next item, or were you just?
I was just going to give an update.
Okay.
So, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So included in the Beaumont Municipal Code is Chapter 17.07.080, parentheses F, Section F. And as you know, we're in the middle of election season, and in the next few weeks, we are going to be in the middle of the campaign, election campaign sign season, and we'll have signs posted up around town. So I wanted to give you an update on what we're going to do this year under my authority as city manager that the code affords me. Our current city ordinance allows campaign signs to be placed in the public right-of-way if candidates first obtain an encroachment permit through the city and follow the requirements outlined in the adopted municipal code section. There's certain criteria that our code states is established by the city manager, and this includes the language in the permit application. There's an application, encroachment permit application, and insurance requirements. So I've asked staff to modify the permit application to no longer require a map to be used, and then I am also going to set the insurance requirement at 0. So the code allows me to set the insurance requirement. Previously, it was set at $1 million. This year, under my authority, I'm going to set it at 0, and that concludes my report.
All right. Thank you. Do you have any questions for the city manager? No? All right,
No?
thank you.
Okay. And then when they get back, I do have a couple, one more
Okay,
thing.
thank you.
Okay, is there any more city manager report?
I have one more thing. I just want to give you a snapshot of what's coming on the 20th. It is going to be a lengthy agenda, so I want to give you notice now. We are going to hold a public hearing on the housing element update. It was approved by the Planning Commission, so it's your turn. We will be bringing a presentation of our new police department facility in conceptual. We are almost through the feasibility design, so we're very excited to show you and the public what our new 51,000 square foot police station will look like. We will also be giving an overview of the fee study, and Mayor White had asked for an update on a concert series. We'll be bringing that. And then the last thing, there's some others, but the last thing of note is a sports park turf management, water reduction study that council asked us to do. So as I said, my apologies, Councilmember Finn, I know you won't be present, but we do have several items that have been waiting to come before council, so we'll be doing that.
We'll make up for it by appointing him to a number of subcommittees.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, so at this point, we will move on to.
Did you want to?
Mr. Mayor, can I
Yes.
just, I looked up the rule related to the question that you asked, and so I just wanted to read it to you. And one of the exceptions under the Brown Act that, requiring meetings of the council be noticed allows you to do the following as a council. Attendance of a majority of the members of a legislative body at an open and publicized meeting organized to address a topic of local community concern by a person or organization other than the local agency, provided that a majority of the members do not discuss among themselves, other than as part of the scheduled program, business of a specific nature that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body of the local agency.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you. And any other, next item is future agenda items? Any future agenda items? All right, well,
You had one thing. At some point in the future, we need to go back and talk about our Cherry Festival involvement to see if we want to form a committee or something to talk to Cherry Festival Association so we can get ready for next year. So that doesn't have to come right away, but just for future thought. All right. Thank you.
to establish for the mayor to set up a ad hoc committee on that? Does it have to be agendized? So Mr. Martinez wants to revisit the idea of a two-person council committee to work with the Cherry Festival on the viability of the future of the Cherry Festival relationship with the city. If I wanted to appoint two members to a committee tonight, could I do that, or does it have to be agendized?
It should be agendized.
Okay.
It's not on the agenda tonight.
Okay. All right.
Mayor, would you like that on the next agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yes. Yeah, Mr. Finn will be happy to be on that committee. All right. So, Mr. Lara, I'll let you start with council reports.
Oh, thank you kindly, Mayor. So on the 26th, I attended with my granddaughter the Build-A-Buddy that the Park and Rec put on. That was a lot of fun. It was awesome. She enjoyed her time. She built a dog, and we're looking forward to another one. So, and then on August 30th, I did the ribbon cutting at the Tesla battery backup at the Nicholas lift station. Sorry.
Lower Oak? Lower Oak?
Lower Oak. We need signs on these things so we know where we're at, what we're doing. Anyways, it was extremely interesting that the batteries are charged during off-peak hours. Heat like this, I don't think we have any off-peak, but that's another story. And then they'll help supplement Edison power during peak hours. So the city saves money as this thing operates. So it was really interesting. I had no idea that it was set up that way. It didn't cost the city anything. It's over a $500,000 project. All the equipment was paid for through a grant that staff worked with Tesla on. So it was very interesting. It was really neat to be there. Don't forget we have Monster Mashes on the 15th of October. I know I'm jumping the gun here, but you're going to get your costumes in order in enough time. Also, we have Trunk or Treat on the 31st, so you might be looking at saving your candy. That's all I have, Mayor.
All right, we'll go to Mr. Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, attended the Calamasa Chamber of Commerce, and I'm proud with our mayor here attending, and then, Councilman Lara, myself, we were there. And, seeing also with our city manager, Christina over there, and, Jennifer over there, and of course, the good-looking guy over here is Jeff Hart. And then I attended also, I'm glad that, I'm proud of you guys. I mean, especially, Doug and city manager Liz on the Wrangell Park. And a good show in there, man. I mean, and ribbon cutting, everything. And I congratulate the whole staff and also the Valdivios. And, over 65 years now, they got their own park. And good job, Mayor, Pro Temp Mayor Julio Martinez. Man, that was a good ribbon cutting. Then lastly is this, not last, I mean, Tax, you did excellent job on the putting together the Tesla lift station. And, me and Councilman, good-looking guy here also, I mean, always happy and everything. I mean, joyful to be with is Mike Lara. And we did excellent. And seems like we practiced how we cut it together, the ribbon. I mean, man, I'm happy about that. Lastly is the, I'm really very thankful about the, seeing all our stuff. I mean, every ribbon cutting, getting together and everything. I'm happy about that. Good job, Liz. I mean, our, city manager over here. I'm proud of you putting together and all those, especially in Wrangell, seeing all our staff and Chief of Police. I mean, thank you for, participating in there. I've seen all the officers in there, and, I got a lot of, saying hi to them. Other than that, I mean, I would like to announce that I'm not seeking for re-election this coming this election, and I'm very thankful for you guys, and I'm proud of you and being here. Thank you, Mayor.
You realize you're still coming here for another 2.5 months, right?
I'll be around, man. I'll be around.
Mr. Martinez thought that might be a farewell speech, so I just wanted to clarify that. Mr. Finn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On September 1st, I attended the Transportation Now meeting. We had a presentation from Emily Leinen, the Chief of Internal Affairs for Caltrans District 8. And I certainly took advantage of that meeting. When you got somebody important in front of you, that's when you ask her questions. But she gave an update on the I-10 tune-up project, which consists of freeway upgrades that extend from Pennsylvania in Beaumont out eastward through Cabazon. And that project is supposed to wrap up by the end of the calendar year. She talked about that there will be a future project on the 10 freeway in Beaumont that will extend from Cherry Valley Boulevard eastward to Beaumont Avenue, and that work will be done in 2025. She gave a website. It's i10tuneup.com, so it's the letter I, the number 10, the word tuneup.com. So it's a nice site to see where traffic shutdowns and so forth and what's going on and everything. So what I took advantage of while in the meeting is I asked her about 2 potential signs for our area. One being a traffic could be stopped sign on the 10 freeway eastbound approaching Beaumont Avenue. We had, if we can remember a few months back, we had a serviceman die in a crash where he rear-ended a semi-truck. I think we've all driven that at traffic hour. We've probably come up on that dangerous spot where traffic is backed up onto the freeway. I also requested a sign at the 10 freeway and 60 freeway off-ramps approaching, coming on to 6th Street eastbound as you approach Veely. Staff had talked about it, council's talked about it, and so forth. We know it's a dangerous area, and something to say, please slow down, or something, maybe even flashing, sign and so forth to say you're approaching a dangerous intersection. By bringing that up, we had several comments that were added to that to say, yes, we agree, we've witnessed that too, and so forth. And so we appreciate the additional comments on that. She's going to report back to us. But I thought at least that's something in the right direction to help, bring it to the public's eye of those two dangerous parts that we have, on the freeway traffic in Beaumont. So that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez.
Mr. Finn, can you give me that second one again?
Yeah, so as you're exiting the 10 freeway and going eastbound to enter onto 6th Street in Beaumont going eastbound,
Okay.
also where the 60 freeway does the same thing, where those two merge. So on the east, if you're on the far south end of it, you're on the 60 freeway, you merge with the 10, and then you merge onto 6th Street. And when you merge onto 6th Street, it is right, I keep calling it the loop around. There's a very small, very short left-hand turn lane to turn left and go westbound on the 10. And it's that little area of about 300 feet that's just a dangerous spot where people come in because they're 60, 70 miles an hour coming off the freeway. They start slowing down, but then they really have to slow down as they're approaching that right-hand turn.
All right, thank you, appreciate it. Mayor, very short, RCA resumes in September, so we have no meeting for August, it was dark. And I did attend the Rangel Park ribbon cutting. Thank you, Mr. Santos, for such a great build up there. Thank you, I appreciate that. That's all, Mayor.
He didn't call me a good-looking guy, but, so I want to thank you guys for showing up to the Rangel Park. I was dropping my daughter off at the dorms for the first time in college, so that was something I had to be there for. I want to thank Elizabeth and staff for attending the Calamasa State of the City. We had so many people there, and I think that sent a really good message that we are interested in their success as well as ours. And then one last piece, we have signed up our dessert supervisor, or our dessert sponsor for the State of the City, and that is our new Cookie Co. So if you're coming to the State of the City, you'll get one of their big 4-inch cookies. So you still need to get your tickets if you haven't already. Other than that, we're all done, and I'll adjourn the meeting at 8:12. Thank you.